Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another dispatch. Here we are. It's a beautiful, lovely spring day here in Colorado. Oh, thank you for letting me know. I hope you got, it's a little, did you hear that? The computer just told me it's recording. I hope you got the first part, that welcoming you to this dispatch. I thought I would bring Dave Hickey, The Invisible Dragon, 4 essays on beauty, originally published in 1993. An updated version of it came out in 2009. This is not that version. This is the earlier one, but I just ordered the 2009 because I'm interested. There's a introduction where he looks at these issues in relation to the world, the art world of 2009, and that's already a long time ago. It's all moving quickly, isn't it? Anyway, so, oh, and he he passed away in 2021. He taught at the University of New Mexico. Okay, so I'll just start with this first essay, see how far we go. I believe we're recording. Yes, we are. Okie dokie. So, Enter the Dragon on the vernacular of beauty. I was drifting, daydreaming really, through the waning moments of a panel discussion on the subject of what's happening now, drawing cartoon daggers on a yellow pad and vaguely formulating strategies for avoiding punch and cookies. When I realized that I was being addressed from the audience, a lanky graduate student had risen to his feet and was soliciting my opinion as to what the issue of the 90s would be. The issue of the 90s, whoop, snatched from my reverie, I said, beauty. And then more firmly, the issue of the 90s will be beauty. A total improvisatory goof, an off-the-wall jumpstart, free association that rose unbidden to my lips from God knows where. Or perhaps I was being ironic, wishing it so, but not believing it likely? I don't know. But the total uncomprehending silence that greeted this modest proposal lent it immediate credence for me. My interlocutor plopped back into his seat, exuding dismay. And out of sheer perversity, I resolved to follow beauty where it led into the silence. Improvising, I began updating Pater. I insisted that beauty was not a thing. The beautiful was a thing. I intoned beauty was the agency that caused visual pleasure in the beholder. And any theory of images that was not grounded in the pleasure of the beholder begged the question of their efficacy and doomed itself to inconsequence. This sounded provocative to me, but the audience continued to sit there, unprovoked. And beauty, he's saying, he wrote it in quotes, just hovered there as well. A word without a language, quiet, amazing, and alien in that sleek institutional space. Like a pre-Raphaelite dragon aloft on its leather wings. If images don't do anything in this culture, I said, plunging on, if they haven't done anything, then why are we sitting here in the twilight of the 20th century talking about them? And if they only do things after we have talked about them, then they aren't doing them. We are. Therefore, if our criticism aspires to anything beyond soft science, the efficacy of images must be the cause of criticism and not its consequence. The subject of criticism and not its object. And this, I concluded rather grandly, is why I direct your attention to the language of visual affect, to the rhetoric of how things look, to the iconography of desire in a beauty, in a, excuse me, in a word, to beauty. I made a voila gesture for punctuation, but to no avail. People were quietly filing out. My fellow panelists gazed into the dark reaches of the balcony or examined their cuticles. I was genuinely surprised. Admittedly, it was a goof. Beauty, pleasure, efficacy, issues of the 90s, admittedly outrageous. But it was an outrage worthy of a rejoinder, of a question or two, a nod, or at least a giggle. I had wandered into this dead zone, this silent abyss. I wasn't ready to leave it at that, but the moderator of our panel tapped on her microphone and said, "Well, I guess that's it, kids." So I never get off my parting shot as we began breaking up, shuffling papers and patting our pockets. I felt a little sulky. Swallowing a pithy allusion to Roland Barthes can do that. And yet, I had no sooner walked out of the building and into the autumn evening than I was overcome by this strange Sherlock Holmesian elation. The game was afoot. I had discovered something, or rather, I had put out my hand and discovered nothing. This vacancy that I needed to understand. I had assumed that from the beginning of the 16th century until just last week, artists had been persistently and effectively employing the rough vernacular of pleasure and began to interrogate our totalizing concepts, the good and the beautiful. And now this was over? Evidently. At any rate, its critical vocabulary seemed to have evaporated overnight, and I found myself muttering detective questions like, who wins? Who loses? Chi bono? Although I thought I knew the answer. Even so, for the next year or so, I assiduously trotted out beauty wherever I happened to be, with whomever I happened to be speaking. I canvassed artists and students, critics and curators in public and in private just to see what they would say. The results were disturbingly consistent and not at all what I would have liked. Simply put, if you broached the issue of beauty in the American art world of 1988, you could not incite a conversation about rhetoric or efficacy or pleasure or politics or even Bellini. You ignited a conversation about the market. That, at the time, was the signified of beauty. If you said beauty, they would say the corruption of the market. And I would say the corruption of the market? After 30 years of frenetic empowerment during which the venues of contemporary art in the United States had evolved from a tiny network of private galleries in New York into this vast transcontinental sprawl of publicly funded postmodern iceboxes, during which time the ranks of art professionals had swollen from a handful of dilettantes on the east side of Manhattan into this massive civil service of PhDs and MFAs who administered a monolithic system of interlocking patronage, which, in its constituents, resembled nothing so much as that of France in the early 19th century? While powerful corporate, governmental, cultural, and academic constituencies vied for power and tax-free dollars, each with its own self-perpetuating agenda, and none with any vested interest in the subversive potential of visual pleasure? Under these cultural conditions, artists across this nation were obsessing about the market, fretting about a handful of picture merchants nibbling canopies on the Concord, blaming them for any work of art that did not incorporate raw plywood. Under these cultural conditions, I would suggest saying that the market is corrupt is like saying that the cancer patient has a hangnail. Yet the manifestations of this pervasive idea fixe remain everywhere present today, not least of all in the sudden evanescence of the market itself after 30 years of scorn for the intimacy of its transactions, but also in the radical discontinuity between serious criticism of contemporary art and that of historical art. At a time when easily 60% of historical criticism concerns itself with the influence of taste, patronage, and the canons of acceptability upon the images that a culture produces, the bulk of contemporary criticism, in a miasma of hallucinatory denial, resolutely ignores the possibility that every form of refuge has its price, satisfies itself with grousing about the corruption of the market. The transactions of value enacted under the patronage of our new non-profit institutions are exempted from this cultural critique, presumed to be untainted, redemptive, disinterested, taste-free, and politically benign. Yeah, right. Despite my informal canvass, I discovered that the reasoning, scare quotes, the reasoning behind this presumption is that art dealers only care about how it looks, while the art professionals employed by our new institutions really care about what it means, which is easy enough to say. And yet, if this is indeed the case, and I think it is, I can't imagine any but the most demented naif, N-A-I-F, naif, giddily abandoning an autocrat who monitors appearances for a bureaucrat who monitors desire. Nor can Michel Foucault, who makes a variation of this point in Surveille, sur, Surveille et Punir, Surveillance and Punishment, I believe, and poses for us the choice that is really at issue here between bureaucratic surveillance and autocratic punishment. Foucault opens his book with a grisly, antique text describing the lengthy public culture torture, the lengthy public torture and ultimate execution of Damiens, the regicide. He then juxtaposes this cautionary spectacle of royal justice with the theory of reformative incarceration propounded by Jeremy Bentham in his Panopticon. Should I pause here? I don't know. Let's see if we can get somewhere. I think we're moving into more than the opening. It goes on. How are we doing? Oh, I've been reading for a while. I should stop. Okay. The game is afoot. And where are we now? Where are we now? Beauty. Really? Maybe? Why not? in this time, in this crazy time. Maybe that's what we have. Okay. Hope you're all making stuff, hanging in there. Talk to you later. Bye bye.